So this week, we're going to talk about what bots do and when to actually use them. And so we're going to get into that. Former robotics COE lead at a Fortune 100 financial services company. I came to Automation Anywhere as a developer evangelist. So I do everything RPA. I love being here. I love doing this stuff. I create all kinds of crazy bots to do different things to solve cool problems that I have and problems that I think are interesting to solve. I also write blog posts and articles and stuff like that. So you will surely see some of my content up on Automation Anywhere blog and hopefully on LinkedIn. So a brief recap of what we did last week. So we talked about what is RPA. And for those of you who didn't join us, we gave the Micah Smith definition of what is RPA. And that is specialized software robots that automate high volume, repetitive, rule-based tasks in an auditable and reliable way. And we said that's kind of the basis of what RPA is. If you want further breakdown of why we chose those exact words in that definition, the week one is recorded. So definitely check that one out. We said, what are the benefits of RPA and why would I use it? We talked about the speed of RPA, the accuracy, consistency, and flexibility in automating tasks. Those were a couple of benefits. I think we went over a full set of 8. So definitely go check those out. And then where do these tools actually work? Where do the bots actually run? We talked about that there's this unattended and attended bot runner idea, and that usually this stuff is running in the cloud, and you would have your control room set up in the cloud or on-prem, and then the bots would run on virtual machines. This week, we're going to talk about what can RPA bots actually do, and we'll look through some common use cases of bots, and then we'll talk about what makes for a good RPA opportunity. So if you're approached with 3 or 4 bots that someone wants you to build, or they say, hey, this is our workflow, what can you automate? We're going to talk through some different tools and some different techniques that you can use to try to figure out what's the best use case for you to tackle for RPA. So what can a bot actually do? I broke this up into 4 sections because this is kind of how I think about the way bots work. And I want to talk through it this way, and then we can obviously look at a real bot and then talk about some different examples. But the first is a trigger side. And this is a phrase that's used in A2019. But trigger is basically, how is my bot going to run? Is it going to be executed off of an email? Is it going to be executed off of the presence of a file or a folder, right? Maybe it's scanning a directory and looking for the presence of a new file showing up. Maybe it's running on a schedule. And that's commonly what we used to do at the financial services company I worked at. We would do scheduled bot runs, and every day at 3 a.m. we would run some report, or we would do some bot execution. It could be triggered off of an object interface trigger. So a click of a button or a keystroke. And that's something new with A2019 that you can start to explore, is how can we trigger these different bots in a new way? I can also have it work off a specific window opening or closing. So I can have the bot work off of what's actually going on in the machine. I also have the ability to have the bot monitor services or see if a service changes state. So if a service stops or a service starts, I might have a bot take over, possibly to restart that service, right? So there's lots of different things you can do there. And then also API to the control room, right? So I can make an API call to the control room. I can pass some values. I want the bot to do X, Y, and Z. Maybe I pass it some variables that it's going to use as a part of its execution. That's very much a common trigger for a bot. Once the bot has started executing, though, then it goes into what I would call like an acquiring data stage. Now, to be very clear, when we talk about these 4, this is not how every single bot has to run, but this is what I use with new developers and people who are just getting started with this stuff to start to understand how to think about what a bot can actually do. So I start with the acquired data after the trigger, right? One of the first things that my bots are always going to do is acquire some kind of data. That could be from reading an email. That could be retrieving a task from a workflow system. It could be extracting data from an Excel spreadsheet, right? A lot of bots are triggered off Excel spreadsheets, and we say, hey, we've got a list of the following, let's say hiring candidates. So we want the bot to review and do a background check, right? The bot would go through that Excel spreadsheet, maybe do some kind of lookup on each of those people, and then maybe fill in an extra column on the far right to say, yeah, this person looks good, or kind of a shady past, right? So the bot can go through and do that kind of stuff. I can extract data from a web page or a thick client. This is going back to the flexibility that we talked about last week. So when we think about RPA, we want to think about the bots are able to work with an API, but they're also able to work on top of some kind of legacy interface. So if you've got this super old application that someone developed and then left the company, and we've been maintaining it forever, right? The bot can work off of that application, but also work off of newer applications. And a lot of people are using bots to kind of tie together those legacy apps with more modern applications. And maybe it's for the purpose of a translation of data. Maybe they're looking to get off of that old system onto a new one. And so the bot is helping with that process. But there's lots of reasons why you would use a thick client app and a web app, usually in the same bot flow or the same process. The bot can read from a database, right? And one of the things we said that's really cool with RPA and kind of separates it from what humans can do is the bot can read from a database, or like this next one says, get data from an API call. So I can actually make use of data that exists in a database. I can make use of data that exists on some service someplace, which might call 3 or 4 other databases, but the bot can do that. And that's something that humans really can't do. So that's one of those cool features where we talk about the flexibility of RPA, the flexibility of bots. They can kind of work in that service-oriented architecture, but then still work on top of the UI for an application. So when we think about acquiring data, we're just thinking about what are we going to use for the bot to actually run? So what's the bot going to possibly use as triggering? What's the bot going to use as knowing what work needs to be done? And that's what I think about with the acquired data stage. The next stage I think about when I create bots is the use the data stage, right? So now that I've got it, what am I going to do with it? I could open a local application or a website, right? Maybe I'm going to use the data from that Excel spreadsheet to tell me what applications I need to go to or what websites I need to hit to scrape data. I could fill out details of a web form. This is a very common process, right? We see humans are being tasked with, hey, take everything in this Excel spreadsheet, make sure it matches our system of record over here, and go through line by line and fill all that out. And we said, that's super mind-numbing work, right? And it's error prone too, because if I'm just going back and forth from copying data from an Excel spreadsheet and filling it into a web form, sometimes I'm going to start with copying and pasting. Other times I'm going to think that I'm kind of fast and I'll start typing it out. And that's really going to cause errors and that's going to cause issues. So even if our original data was really clean, having a human in that loop to do something that humans really weren't well designed for is going to be a risk for that process. The bot can be used to compare data from multiple sources to validate. So when we're using that data, we've acquired something, maybe it's from a database or from an API, and we want to compare that to something else. So maybe we're comparing 2 different applications internally. If you think about the number of places that a customer address and customer contact information may exist in your organization, how do we make sure all of those are in sync, right? Do we have a real system of record, or does this one usually get updated by this one team and this other team updates another one? So we can use that data to acquire from one system and then use it on another system to make sure those 2 are in sync. Navigate through web pages, right? So I can grab stuff from my bot. I can then tell the bot exactly what I needed to do, and it can navigate through lots of pages. So maybe I'm going to buy a car or something like that, right? That was a bot that I wrote that we had a video on, right? I would say what kind of car I want to buy, the make, the model, the year. I didn't put the year, but the zip code and things like that. It would then go to cargurus.com. It would look at all of the pages that were returned for the matching car, and it would keep navigating through all the pages until we'd exhausted all the search results, right? So that's a good example of the bot can keep going through lots of pages using that data that I originally supplied it to use more data or even acquire more data. I can copy data from one application to another. I think we already kind of touched on that. And then also update a system of record. So again, when I'm using that data, it doesn't necessarily have to be a web form, or it doesn't have to be a UI. It can be an API. So I could even use Automation Anywhere to do, acquire data from one API, maybe massage it, make some work on it, and then use it in another API to update another system. And when we think about this use and acquire of data, we can really go back and forth, right? So I might do an extraction, then use some of that data, then go back and get more data. So I would think of it like that. This is not necessarily a directly linear flow. I can bounce back and forth between these different columns that are laid out. I promised I was going to go faster this time, and we're not making excellent time. Delivery, right? So when the bot is finished with whatever it's tasked to do, it can send an email with results, right? I can have an email whoever made that original API call. Hey, here's your work. It's done. This is that data you were concerned with. I just did the update. Just wanted to let you know. I could update or create an output file on a shared drive. So the bot could update my Excel spreadsheet and then move it to the done folder. I know I can go grab it there. The bot's done. It did its reconciliation. I can go look at the results. The bot could update a database with the results from the bot run, right? It manipulated some data, made some changes. It kept a record of all of those changes that it made in this database for me. I can go review that. It can update a workflow application. So if I'm using a bot as a part of an ECM flow, right, I could have the bot kicked off at a certain point. It would do some workflow task and then submit that task back to the workflow application. Then the workflow application could, obviously take it to what's next, whether that's to a human or to another automated step or even to another bot step. And then finally, record a log of everything that the bot has done, all the decisions it's made, a full audit of exactly what it clicked, what data it was looking at, stuff like that. Going back to our definition last week, we said that bots are fully auditable. And that's one of the huge benefits of RPA, is that we know exactly what the bot was doing at every step of the way. So what can a bot actually do? This is a bot that I created in A2019 a while ago. So I'll just talk through this one real quick because I think it kind of hits home with some of the points we just talked about. But if we look at the top here, it's an RSS reader. So what it's doing is it's going to read from an RSS feed. It's going to take all the data from that RSS feed, build some HTML. So it's going to build like a dummy website and then deliver that as an HTML file, and it's going to open it up for you. So for trigger, it was manual execution, which is actually not one that we mentioned on that last page, but manual execution is obviously fair game, especially when we talk about kind of human in the loop and humans kicking off these bot processes. From there, it read from an RSS feed. Now, if you look at the orange icon here, and I'm highlighting it there, that's a step in A2019. And a step lets me basically collapse a lot of my logic into, kind of a shortcut almost. So that step says read from RSS feed. There's a lot of steps inside of that are actually, opening up that stream, being able to parse through the data, grabbing out the data that I want, adding it to variables. But I've included that in a step so that when I talk about the actual process, it's a lot cleaner for me to look at it. And, you can drill down into it if you need to, but for the purposes of this example, we're just going to look at the step. The step after that is to build the HTML. And that's where I'm taking everything that I read from that RSS feed and I'm putting that into an HTML template that I built that would just create these different bootstrap cards. So if you look up here on the right, we've got these different bootstrap cards. It includes the image for that particular article. It includes a title, a brief description, the publish date, and then a link to read more. So if you want to actually go and hit that article URL, you can go from there, and then it'll take you to, I think this was from wired.com. It'll take you to wired.com, and then you could read the rest of the article. And then finally, that delivery was creating the HTML file as the output. All right, we're going to keep cranking away here. Man, we are really short on time. All right, what makes for a good RPA opportunity? So inevitably, as an RPA developer, there's going to come a time when someone comes to you and says, hey, I need you to automate this workflow, or I have this one particular opportunity, I need it automated. And you'll probably have more than one of those, right? You're going to have lots and lots of groups coming to you saying, hey, can you automate this? Can you automate that? Can you help me out here? And you need some way to be able to score those as being a good fit for RPA. And so I put together this kind of cheat sheet for you so that you can look at and see, all right, what are these different suitability factors? And if I were to give this opportunity a score, how can I measure, opportunity A versus opportunity B to see which one's a better fit for me to automate? So let me go here. The first we're going to look at is the nature of the data. So I gave these a point so that when you're kind of looking at different opportunities, I'd probably do this with a group, 3 or 4 of you sitting down and all kind of scoring them to figure out what the best fit is. But I would give 1 point to something that's not a great use case for RPA and 4 points to something that's like RPA sweet spot, right? And then obviously 3 and 2 for the kind of in between. So if we look at the nature of data, is the data that I'm working with handwritten and unstructured? If so, I'm probably going to have a really rough time dealing with it. Right now, there are some caveats to that, obviously, and none of these suitability factors on their own would necessarily disqualify you from considering it as an RPA opportunity. But when we look at handwritten data and unstructured data, it's really difficult to deal with, right? The unstructured data can sometimes be handled by things like IQbot, which would definitely help in that kind of situation. But if it's handwritten, that's a difficult challenge for humans to make sense of, right? When I'm trying to read someone else's handwriting, that's tough for me to be able to make sense of. So, I can understand where from a bot perspective, that's also a real challenge. On the flip side of that, we have the 4-pointer, which is the digital, structured, and patterned data. So if I know my data is coming in clean, it's coming through an Excel spreadsheet, I'm reading it from a CSV, I'm reading it from a database, it's coming from an API call, the data has been validated, then I give it 4 points, right? And so we have those kind of in between where we say, well, it's a mix of digital and handwriting that might, be a little bit better, but I still wouldn't have a great end-to-end process. And then 3 is digital form extraction. So that's where IQBot would really find its sweet spot as well. We have data. It's either in a digital format where it started, it's a high quality image, we can do an OCR on it, or we can extract the data in a reliable way. The next suitability factor is system dependencies. And again, this will 100% be opinion, right? If you want to look at this in a slightly different way, that's totally fine. I would say that something that has 10 plus systems involved is a very challenging automation, right? There's a lot of breakpoints where something could go wrong. That's not to say that I would never attempt an RPA automation for a 10 system process, but especially starting out, I would be looking for those 1 to 3 system opportunities. So where I'm not making a bunch of different calls, where there's not a bunch of different applications that could cause breakpoints for me, those are going to be the ones that I'm going to give priority to, especially when starting out. We'll probably do one of these at some point on COE and getting started and best practices there. But for me, it's, number one is very much start with some stuff that's small that you can get some easy, quick wins on. If I can have 1 or 3 systems involved, I know that that's going to be pretty easy for me to work with. I'm not going to have a lot of weird dependencies. In a large enterprise environment, when you have lots of system dependencies, you're going to start running into systems where, hey, oh yeah, we didn't update that. It's not on the latest build that's in production. Sorry about that. Our test system is not updated. Our team's really small. All these excuses that make it really challenging for you to do automations on these different applications. So the more applications involved, the more challenging of a factor I would give any automation. So just keep that in mind. You can change the numbers around if you want to. You don't have to use my 1 to 3 system metrics there for 4 points, but just keep in mind the number of system dependencies can make this an extra challenge. Next is process difficulty. So the process itself, is it a very challenging process? It's a moderately challenging process, straightforward process, or relatively straightforward process, or straightforward, right? And what we mean here is like when humans are doing this, are humans having trouble with this? Is the process itself really straightforward? It's well documented, or is this a sloppy process to start with, right? I would dodge any kind of process where there hasn't been some kind of process improvement that's happened on it already, right? I want to make sure that this is already a relatively efficient process before we start to bring a bot in. Because if I have a bot start to automate an already sloppy, unreliable process, then the bot is going to have a tough time with this, just like humans do. Frequency of process changes. So the process itself, is it something that's regularly changing because of business needs, or are process changes very rare, right? It's been this way for a long time. We've always done it this way. Or, hey, this is changing like weekly because there's new laws coming out, or this group is like really needy and they always want to make new changes. So keep those things in mind as you're trying to score your different opportunities. Applications to automate, right? What are the applications themselves? On the 1 point side, no API, externally built, in Flash, right? That's like the toughest situation to deal with. On the flip side, we've got object IDs everywhere. There's clean APIs with good documentation, and some of the stuff is in-house built, so we can have leverage on the people who built it to make sure they add object IDs where they don't exist right now, right? And we're talking about web applications there. So the more influence you can have on the application you're automating, the more influence you can have on those developers, the better chance you're going to have of having a really clean automation that's going to consistently work. If it's externally built, there's no API, and it's built in Flash, you're going to have a bad time, right? I mean, things that change frequently and things like that are going to cause your bot some problems. So you want to keep that in mind as you start to consider those different opportunities. Cognition level. So this is thinking about what the humans are actually doing as a part of this task. Is it a high cognitive task where humans are making subjective decisions at multiple points in the process? Or is it a low cognitive task where this is like the mind-numbing work that Micah was talking about earlier, where we go from this Excel spreadsheet to this system and, it's pretty straightforward. So keep that in mind. Human hours spent, how much time are humans actually doing this, right? And that's a good indicator for us as to whether or not this is a good opportunity to automate in the first place. Am I going to spend, 300 hours creating an automation for it, and then only 3 humans are spending 12 hours a year on it? That's not a good ROI for me. That's not going to work out. But if it's a high amount of human time that's already being spent on this process, and I can obviously see that I'm going to spend much less than that to develop the bot and get it running and have it stably tested, I definitely would stick to those kind of scenarios. So I want to look at a quick example, then we'll get to some questions, I promise. This is a sample business process that I put together here. And this is like working from a customer side. So the customer submits an order, they submit it to a sales rep. The sales rep logs that and enters it into system ABC. I use system ABC here just so we could kind of see that tag in multiple places. If that's Salesforce for you, if that's some other application, feel free to kind of insert that in there. The contracting team reviews the order in system ABC. They check then to see if it's standard terms. If it is standard terms, then the agent approves the order in the system and it gets sent out to the fulfillment team. If it is not standard terms, then the agent requests further approval from the legal team. And that's where the legal team gets involved to either mark the the standard term or non-standard terms as okay and return that to the agent for fulfillment, or to deny those terms and say that this sale can't go through, in which case they would go back to the contracting agent. The order would not be shipped and the rep would be notified that the sale couldn't go through. Looking over at the fulfillment side here, they receive the order of the shipment in system ABC, and then they log the shipment details in system DEF. So this is pretty common, right? Someone will come to you with this kind of workflow and say, hey, can you automate this? And this is going to happen one of two ways. Either they say, hey, can you automate this? Here's the flow, good luck. Or they're going to say, we have specific steps within this process we want you to automate, so please take a look at it, right? And so either way, you're going to have to somehow score either the process itself or the specific steps that they wanted automated with this suitability index that we created here. So just looking at the process myself, I would say, reviewing the system or reviewing the order in system ABC to see if it's standard terms. I think a bot could probably do that, right? Our standard terms are probably well published. Even if there's 3 or 4 variations of them, the bot could check to make sure the standard terms were being met. And probably do this decision as to whether it should go to the legal team or be sent over for fulfillment. When we talk about the agent canceling the order, log the note, and sending it out to the rep to be notified, the bot could probably do that as well, right? So let's just take those kind of steps as an example. We know, we've got a couple steps here that could be automated. There might be more, but let's stick with that for right now. So looking at this scoring model, for the nature of data, let's say it's a 4, right? Because the sales rep is entering this data into system ABC digitally. So we're going to assume that all the data is there. The bot has access to it. The bot can work. The bot can, do what it needs to make those decisions off standard terms and to cancel the order if needed. For system dependencies, really we've only highlighted 2 here. There's system ABC, which is for, it looks like all of our sales and kind of our contracts, and even the legal team uses it. And then there's also one other system, which is DEF, which is for our fulfillment in this case. But we didn't talk about automating that, so I'm going to give system dependencies a 4. For process difficulty, let's give this a 3, right? We don't know, we weren't given specific terms on what exactly to automate. We talked about a couple ideas of where things could be automated. We need to see a little bit more about what is the contracting team actually doing in that system ABC? What are the standard terms coming in looking like? Is that really a reliable source of us being able to automate off of? And then canceling this order and logging notes. Do we trust the bot to do that on its own? So, I'd want to do some more investigation, but at a rough guess, I'd give that a 3. Frequency of process changes, we can't know that from just this single diagram. It would have to be some research with that team to understand how they view their processes, how they change them. I'll give that a 3 as well. Applications to automate, we're going to give that a 4. We've only got really one system here. And the application sounds like it's being used by lots of teams, so we should be able to get the bot set up on that. Cognition level, it sounds like it's a pretty low cognitive task to me. We're looking to see if the system, if the terms match what we expect. If not, we reject it. If so, it goes straight to the fulfillment team. So I'm going to give that a 4. And then human hours spent, again, we don't know that exactly, but let's assume that we're making lots of sales, which would be great, and that the contracting team is regularly reviewing these orders to see if they're standard terms or not, right? So looking at that, we've got all 3s and 4s. I would say that's a pretty good opportunity for automation. I would also look at this process and see where we could add extra value with the bot, right? And so maybe the bot is helping us out with sending some emails in certain places, right? To keep our customers updated on things they weren't previously updated with. So that's another way that you can look at these processes to say, hey, yeah, we can automate some stuff, but we can also add some extra value in different places. Like here at the bottom, sending an email to the customer to notify of shipment details. That sounds great, right? That's something that wasn't in the original process. Now the customer can know more about their order is on the way, and we're creating better customer experiences with the use of the bots. There may be other processes where we say, hey, if it's a cancellation, we don't want the bot to do that. That requires a little bit more sensitivity. So we'll have an agent get involved in that case to craft that email. All right, so quick recap, and then we'll get to some questions. I apologize, we went a bit long here. Trigger, acquire data, use data, and delivery. Those are the four very broad categorizations. There's going to be stuff that doesn't fit exactly within that. I get it. I just wanted to talk about very generally what bots can do and how we can think about what bots are capable of. And then what makes for a good RPA opportunity. Again, feel free to use my scoring model, create your own, customize your own based off of that. I think it's important to establish that kind of best practice internally so that as you look at these different opportunities, you know what's good for automation and what's not. Feedback. Keep the feedback coming. You can surely send the feedback in the chat here or directly to our social channels. I think some of the feedback is going to be make Micah not speak so long because this went long. Like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what we can do to be as effective as possible for you. We want these to be fun. We want these to be interactive. So we want to make sure that you're getting the most value out of these as possible. Next week, we will be getting hands-on with bot building, and I'll be doing that with you. So you all have a little bit of homework, and that homework is to go to Automation Anywhere University and complete the Hello A2019 bot. Okay, we're going to be doing some exercises on the live session next week. I'll be leading you through those. They'll be in A2019. If you want to do them along with me, that's awesome. Just make sure you've completed that course because it'll get you set up with the bot agent and get everything installed to make sure that your system is up and running. So take a look at that course if you want to follow along with me. If you want to just watch me and then do it on your own later, that's cool too. All right, let's transition this to some live Q&A. So I think I'm on like a 3-second delay, so I'm going to wait and do an awkward pause here to see your questions, but I will surely try to answer them all, some of them. So hang tight. I'm still waiting for questions to come in. I had to pull up my screen to get the LinkedIn going here. All right, lots of highs. Hello to all of you. Good use case of human-bot interaction. Fire off the questions. Preferably in English. I'm not great with any other languages. How do you think schools and universities can use bots? I definitely think they should use them as a part of their education materials, right? I think someone coming out of school and being able to already know how to do some basic programming, knowing how to do RPA, they can be really effective in the workforce. I think that schools could also use some of this stuff for, the first things that come to mind are like grading, doing some of that. I know that there's already applications in place for plagiarism checks and that kind of thing, but I think there's definitely opportunities for schools to use RPA to engage with students. I think there's probably also a lot of back-end processes that schools have that bots could be involved with. They do billing, they do accounts payable, they do invoicing, just like every other type of customer that we might have or other organizations. So I think that's definitely a good use case. What social media bots will be accessible to? Yeah, I mean, with social media, you could definitely use bots. I had someone reach out to me for a job, I think yesterday, and they had the wrong name on it. And I commented that a bot would have at least gotten my name right. So I think you could definitely use bots on social media. I think it's kind of dangerous though when you create really bad user experiences like that. The guy said, "Hey Matthew," obviously that's not my name. So that was not a great user experience for me. But I think in social media, there's some good opportunity for interacting with people. Probably not, I like to be really authentic with the way that I communicate with people on social media. But if you're just going to go around and like posts and, maybe schedule tweets, you could probably use it for that kind of purpose. Does this have OCR, and how's the quality in banks using OCR and AA? So I have used the OCR in this some. The OCR in IQBot is really good, and it's going to continue to learn the different forms that you're working with. I have a background in document imaging. I was doing that for like 10 years using a platform called Captiva. So I was really impressed with what IQBot is doing. So that's really saying something. I think you can use Abby with it. I think Tesseract was also included in version 11. I'm pretty sure I don't want to say this for sure. I think it's also included in A2019. I haven't used it specifically. Part of the problem with OCR in any kind of application is being able to find the specific fields. And as page registration changes and different applications have scanned a particular page, going through and being able to identify where that data exists on a form is really challenging. And so, for page registration and stuff like that, I don't think that that's really built into Automation Anywhere Basic, but I think Basic is not a real term, but in the base package, I think if you're going to do a lot of OCR stuff, I would strongly encourage you to take a look at IQBot because it does some really cool extraction, and it will continue to learn from what you're doing. All right, we'll take one more question. What is the step in your model when you find that the bot looks like it takes more time and then you promise in the beginning? So I would say, I hope that's not a shot at me going long on this thing. I tried to make it as efficient as possible, but I definitely went longer than I expected. I think it's as a consultant or someone who's going to be doing RPA development, it's very important to make sure that you're staying in sync with the stakeholders who have asked you to do this development. So as you start to create parts of the automation, I would have weekly sync ups with them to at least make sure that we're in tune with what progress looks like versus what we thought it would versus the full end-to-end flow. And it might mean that you're automating particular tasks of a much greater workflow, and you break those up task by task as opposed to trying to tackle all of it at once. And that's how I would approach it. I'm going to try and do just this one task, and then just this one task, and just this one task. So those can all be separate deliverables. And in that way, at the very end, hopefully I can string all of that stuff together and automate the entire process end to end. But I would try to chunk it up as much as possible so that I don't have this huge dependency that has a 9-month deliverable and then has issues, right? I want to make sure that I'm doing it piece by piece. I'd probably take the easiest pieces first to make sure we get some good traction and then go from there. All right, that's it for the questions for this week. Thank you so much for joining. Appreciate you guys being here. Thank you for the feedback. I'll try and read through some more of the questions after this is over. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be back next week with a live bot build, so make sure to check out Automation Anywhere University. Hit up that A2019 Hello World bot so we can make sure the bot agent is installed.